Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to go ahead and call to order the Public Safety Committee meeting for Tuesday, November 16th. Go ahead and get things started with an update first from the Office of Oversight and Accountability. Mr. Davis.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's my privilege to provide you with an update from OPA. Did want to update you all regarding a governance report that was provided as an update, a briefing to City Commission at the last week's City Commission meeting. At that time, no action was requested from Commission, but it was an opportunity for us to update them regarding these implementation plans. I won't do a full briefing since some of the individuals on this committee have already heard it, but I will hit the highlights. Yeah, thank you. So you may recall that OPA was tasked with doing a review of all of the public safety boards and commissions here in the city of Grand Rapids, and included with that were first the Civilian Appeals Board. So when we look at the initial recommendations, which are now on the screen, there were 5 recommendations around the Civilian Appeals Board. The first was to implement mandatory onboarding and training for all CAP members. The second was to improve written reports in order to promote fairness, enhance the quality of board decisions. The third was to increase jurisdictional authority to align with best practices and to promote increased accountability. The fourth was to empower CAB to make formal policy recommendations to elevate community voice in public safety operations. And the fifth was to reimagine City Commission Policy 800-02 to increase procedural justice and to reflect and ensure transparency. So after the initial briefing that was provided both to City Commission and to this body some time ago, OPA went back to speak to those board members and to really look at what the feedback was from those boards. So as you can see based on this slide, for the first 3 recommendations, the board members supported the recommendations as written. For the fourth recommendations, board members supported the recommendations. However, they wanted the word policy to be removed so that the recommendations can be made regarding additional training or other general areas of concern. And for the fifth recommendations, board members supported the recommendations. However, they wanted to make sure that the recommendation was actionable. So here on this slide, you see the final recommendations, which in large part remain the same with the exception of that word policy removed, but you also see an implementation plan. For recommendations 1 and 2, those the board already has the authority to implement those recommendations, and it's being incorporated into recommendation 5. Recommendations 3 and 4 are also being incorporated into recommendation 5, or the implementation plan of recommendation 5. And then the implementation plan around recommendation 5 is as follows. It's the creation of an 11-member OPA-led work group comprised of representatives from OPA, the City Attorney's Office, the Grand Rapids Police Department, the ACLU, the NAACP, the Civilian Appeals Board, and the Urban Core Collective, as well as 4 community members, 1 from each ward and 1 appointed by the mayor. The idea is that we will meet over a period of 4 months to redesign City Commission Policy 800-02. Now, the reason that 4-month period is important is that, as many of you know, the city will be entering into labor negotiations with all of our unions starting at the beginning of next year, or starting next year. What we understand about that is that some of the things related to the Civilian Appeals Board may require bargaining. So we want to make sure that this reimagination process happens in a time in which we still have the opportunity to bargain with the unions as needed. Additionally, at the completion, this group will provide a final policy recommendation to the city manager and to City Commission that will fully reimagine civilian oversight of law enforcement in the city of Grand Rapids. Once this group is appointed, the work group will create an engagement strategy to ensure the community is heard throughout the process. And I'll pause there to see if there were any questions regarding that part of the update.
Any questions, colleagues? Mayor?
No, Brandon, I don't have any questions. I just want to reiterate, I know we talked about this at our work group last week, but I just want to reiterate that I'm supportive of moving forward with a work group and making sure that we have those conversations as we move forward with any changes.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other feedback at this time, I'll next talk about the Community Relations Commission. And the three recommendations in the initial report for the Community Relations Commission were to, number one, refocus the CRC's Public Relations Subcommittee to address systemic inequities in the criminal justice system. Number two was to provide additional training regarding the City of Grand Rapids Strategic Plan, GRPD Strategic Plan, GRFD Strategic Plan, and OPA Strategic Plan. And you may recall that was in response to survey results that came out of that initial report where members of the Community Relations Commission expressed a desire for additional training in those areas. And number three was to increase the public's access and knowledge regarding the CRC's operations. The CRC fully supported number one and number three. They also supported number two, but they wanted the understanding to be mentioned that the leadership of the CRC will be providing that additional training. So when we look at the implementation and timeline for the CRC has already begun to implement these changes. So they completed the first recommendation in September of 2021, and they're working to create a training packet for their members with plans in addition to have discussion point by the end of the fiscal year. And the CRC for number three plans to facilitate community feedback listening sessions by the end of the fiscal year as well. So interestingly, as we talk about the Community Relations Commission, they already have the authority to implement the changes that are recommended. And this authority comes from the Board and Commission Handbook and also through Title IX of the Human Rights Ordinance. I'll move on to the Public Safety Committee. So as we talk through the Public Safety Committee, I know you all probably remember these recommendations more than any of the others, but the recommendations were one, to create a formal structure to track and evaluate progress on Public Safety Committee recommendations, also to elevate the work of the SAFE Task Force by converting it to a permanent advisory committee of the Public Safety Committee, and third was to increase the public access and knowledge regarding Public Safety Committee operations. This board, I'm sure, recalls that it supported both recommendation 1 and 3, but as it related to recommendation 2, the Public Safety Committee voted to recommend that the SAFE Task Force be adopted into the Public Safety Committee in advisory capacity until the remaining fiscal responsibilities of the SAFE Task Force be exhausted, and then the tasks of the SAFE Task Force would be incorporated into the Public Safety Committee moving forward. So as we talk through the implementation and timeline, I'll spend a little more time on this one since it's directly related to public safety. For recommendation number 1, the implementation plan is that the staff liaison will ensure that citizen member positions are reflected in both the meeting minutes and the resolutions that advance to City Commission from the Public Safety Committee beginning in December of 2021. Essentially, that means now when the Public Safety Committee votes on an item, only the commissioners who vote are reflected in the item. And moving forward, what will happen is in the body of that resolution or the body of that item, the position of those citizen members will reflect. Again, this is attached to the city's commitment to elevate resident voice in city operations. Additionally, we wanted to make sure committee members were reminded that they're empowered to request informational updates from public safety departments and that those be included on the agenda. With that being said, based on our system of government, it is the city manager that creates the agenda. However, those requests can be made so that they can be taken into consideration. The staff liaison will also maintain a list of past requests and recommendations made by the Public Safety Committee and include those recommendations and outcomes on the Public Safety Committee's webpage. I'll skip number 2 and we'll come back to that on a different slide. But at number 3, the staff liaison will promote that public safety is streamed and recorded in addition to working to do some type of promo for the Public Safety Committee to recruit new members for appointment beginning in January 2022. Again, those are still things that have to be worked out in detail, but that is the implementation plan in which the staff liaison plans to operate. And then number 4, whenever the Public Safety Committee votes, again, we talked about this earlier, that position will be reflected in those items in order to make sure that the voice of those citizen members are included. So I will pause here and see if there are any questions regarding the Public Safety Committee implementation plan.
Oh, Ms. Cameron? Mayor? No?
Okay.
Please continue.
Thank you. The last category was that for the SAFE Task Force. And I'll start with 2 and 3. So for 2 and 3, the first one was, or the second one was to fully define the role, responsibility, and scope of the SAFE Advisory Committee to focus on the city and public safety strategic plans. And SAFE supported that recommendation. And number 3 was to increase transparency regarding SAFE's activities. And SAFE supported that recommendation. The initial recommendation, that being number 1, is the same recommendation that was made under the Public Safety Committee. And the SAFE Task Force did not support this recommendation and instead recommended that the SAFE Task Force be elevated to a board or commission of the City of Grand Rapids with resident and anti-violence practitioners appointed by city commissioners and the mayor. And the easiest way for us to look at that is to look at this slide. And this slide has what are now 3 different recommendations. You see a staff recommendation, which is that first recommendation, the original recommendation. The second is the recommendation of the Public Safety Committee. And the third is the recommendation of the SAFE Task Force. So as we talk about the recommendation of staff, that recommendation can be implemented through the creation of a new city commission policy, establishing SAFE as a permanent advisory committee to the Public Safety Committee. We recommended that those initial appointments to the committee should be made from the existing SAFE Task Force membership. The policy that would be created would have to flesh out all of the details related to that, but this is a summary of how that would occur. As to the recommendation that came from this committee, as a mayoral task force, the mayor would have the authority to implement the recommendation by culminating the work of the SAFE Task Force at the conclusion of fiscal year 22. There would be no additional commission action needed at that point based on the language in the standing committee rules that gives the Public Safety Committee authority to recommend support for programs as it relates to public safety matters. Then for the third recommendation, that item could be implemented through the creation of a new city commission policy to allow SAFE to function as a permanent citizen board or commission, similar to some of the other boards and commissions that exist here in the city of Grand Rapids. So again, this was a briefing that was provided to commission as it relates to all of these matters. No action was taken by commission at that time because no policy was brought to commission at that time to vote upon. What was brought is implementation plans and information about what can happen and what would be required for those things to happen. Are there any questions?
Questions? No? No. Ms. Cameron? Yes.
I'm just getting my thoughts together here. Yeah, I think at the meeting that we spoke about this, you know, we had this committee wanted the SAFE Task Force to work under us, just because I think there's a duplication sometimes of what we do, and so we weren't always knowing what SAFE was doing, and I don't think they understood that, you know, what we were talking about either. And sometimes I do have a concern about the members of the SAFE Task Force at times, just because they all seem, well, they seem to be inclusive, and they are exclusive, I'm sorry, and not real inclusive of other members joining them. I think you need a diverse group of people that, you know, don't necessarily think alike, but all have a love and support for public safety and all things safe for our community. And I just think it's an exclusive group that isn't really welcoming or really want anybody else to join them. I don't know how you become a member of that. I know I've tried in years past, and my requests have gone unanswered. So I have a bit of a concern with that, and I would love to see them fall under this group. That's just my thought.
Thank you for the feedback. My understanding of the recommendation that was made by this committee was not for SAFE to fall under the Public Safety Committee, but for the work of SAFE to be embodied by the Public Safety Committee. But what you described does reflect the staff recommendation, which was for SAFE to work under this committee. But thank you.
Mayor?
Well, and I'll just add, we had a lengthy conversation about this among the commission, and I can tell you that there's different opinions around the commission table on what should happen next with SAFE, whether it becomes an advisory, standalone. The idea was shared to have a conversation with the county and really make it a more of a county-wide effort around violence prevention. And then also, how do we make sure that some of our other efforts related to violence prevention, and including the work that's already being done at the police department with our crime prevention coordinator, is better incorporated into the work, as well as cure violence. And so I shared during the workshop that I think we need to take a little bit more time before we make a final decision on what is the best governance structure and where does it fit. And so I anticipate that will happen probably over the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Is there any other questions or feedback? Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. Our next item on the agenda is a update from the fire department. Chief Lehman.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to present in front of you. And we're going to do an update to what we have, the information we have for you is on our hiring process, on our recruitment efforts, and also on a proposed cadet program. So in the fiscal year 22 adopted budget, we did not budget for a recruit academy for this upcoming year. We believe that we would be able to, in a continuation budget, that we would be able to maybe squeak by and eliminate some of those expenses. But after doing some analysis, after looking at the impacts of COVID, after seeing some unanticipated retirements, as well as some increases to attrition rates, we've determined that through that analysis that we do need a recruit class. And so we also determined that long-term savings in the amount of about $750,000 would be had by hiring a class starting in January versus postponing that and just running on overtime, which is actually kind of exhausting the workforce right now. So we are asking for $500,000 to be out of potential ARPA funding to be awarded towards an academy class for 15 personnel. And we have arrived at the number of 15 by doing an analysis. We have what we call a float, so we're authorized at 201 personnel. And if you can go to the next slide, please, Asante. Thank you. The hiring of, we have 201 authorized personnel. We float to 206 as our top end and 195 as our bottom end. And so the analysis shows us that right now the numbers warrant that we hire 15 personnel. We also know that in years past, throughout the academy class, we usually find that we have an attrition of about 1 personnel out of any given academy class, either to an injury or in this case, we may see some impacts of ongoing COVID-related issues in the academy class. So we're not anticipating any more than 1, but we do anticipate that we could lose 1 to that class. Next slide, please. This slide represents the what I was just talking about. The yellow line represents the high end of the float and the red line the low end of the float, and center is where we're at right now. You can see this is a 3-year analysis, and the lowest point on the graph starting from the left represent when we have decided to make a hiring, and the spike represents the total number of hires. And then you can see the attrition goes on throughout the year, and we go ahead and we hire again. So right now we are at 201, and we know that by the January of 22 we'll be at the low point. it takes us quite a bit of time. We did not have an existing list in place, so we had to go through a full recruitment effort. We were able to accelerate that effort, be able to get a list in place, which is happening right now at this time. But that all takes time. And also, when we hire an academy class, usually it's a 6-month period of time from the time that we start the academy until the time that those people can actually come into the workforce and start impacting overtime. Next slide, please. So I'd like to explain a little bit about what our recruitment efforts were. And I also have Chief Freeman here with me, a battalion chief that has been helping us in running our recruitment efforts. So we coordinated with the Offices of Diversity, Inclusion, Human Resources, Special Events, and GR Fire Administration to reach a diverse candidate pool. We networked extensively in the community with Community Relations Committee, as well as attending many events in the community, hosting some recruitment events at our fire stations on the south end and north end of this town in order to sign up candidates. We completed and launched a website called Join GR Fire to more streamline the process and provide additional information and an easier way for people to understand what's going on. Next slide, please. We completed an informational handout card as well as reassigned a captain to assist with the recruitment activities for a period of about 7 weeks. That was very helpful, and it really helped to interact on a regular basis with all the recruitment efforts that were going on. We met with the Urban League as well as GRPS, GRPD, Mercantile Bank, and all those others as we looked at what they're doing in their recruitment efforts. And then we also engaged with the Spanish community in order to make sure that we were covering as much of our diverse population as possible. Next slide, please. We were able to recruit a pool of 703 candidates that showed interest and applied for a fire department application. Those numbers are down significantly, but still in this day and age, I believe are a very good number when we know that on the east side of the state that there are open firefighting positions right now because they're not able to even get anybody in a candidate pool. And so a lot of that has to do with their additional requirements of being a paramedic or a higher level of medical personnel. But out of that 703 personnel, we show that we can show our breakout in diversity, and I believe that we maintained, even though the number is down, I believe we maintained a diversification level that was representative of what we have not only had in the past, but it has increased slightly in some areas. We are utilizing through HR some different methods of screening in order to arrive at a more refined candidate pool. And so right now I can tell you that I have been informed that we're down to about 125 candidates right now that have passed the written test. And so that pool will get reduced. And I don't have the breakout of the diversification of that pool as of yet, but I will be getting that information from HR shortly. Next slide, please. So while we do massive recruitment efforts, and they're very intense and costly, we're required to do that in order to really arrive at the kind of pool that we need. I believe that a way that we can really create a more steady stream of diversity into the organization is through a cadet program. And the police department has run this successfully for a long period of time. We in the fire department have never really had a cadet program. This is just a very basic draft of what some ideas would be, and allowed us to be able to budget a number for it. But I see 6 interns within a program. I really would like to stay with a grow your own model that would limit our pool to City of Grand Rapids youth that fit a certain age requirement. We don't want to put some really heavy educational restrictions on it. We'd really like to be able to interview and find the right people that have a right fit for us. And I believe by doing that, and also by providing the kind of education, one-on-one education necessary within that limited size pool, we'd be able to really be able able to refine a candidate's ability to successfully meet all the requirements that we have. So I don't propose that a cadet in our program would do anything to bypass anybody else within the civil service process. But what I propose is that by us working with these cadets or interns, that they would be ultimately a very successful candidate for us as meeting all the requirements that everybody else would meet. At the same time as being able to provide them with an income and job skills, and giving us a chance to evaluate and giving them a chance to evaluate whether the fire service is really a career for them. And so right now, again, this is an unbudgeted item, so it is not something that I'm coming asking for right now, but merely presenting the information. It will be the manager's decision on whether or not this is a useful way of spending some ARPA funding, and it would probably be done on a basis of just a trial and study period. And that concludes my presentation. I'm open for any questions that you may have.
Thanks so much, Chief. I will allow me to publicly state my support for this fire cadet program. To the point that you've made, this would be the very first time, very first opportunity. I think that it'd be good timing, simply because there is, I think, the need to try to reach out to obviously the younger generation and reach them at an early enough stage to where they could potentially see the benefit of being a firefighter. And just love the idea of this almost being like a beta test type, where you are looking at a very small number of about, as you mentioned, 6. I just think it makes good sense. So I am very much in favor of your suggested or your proposed cadet program. So, Ms. Cameron, Mayor, anything?
No, I'll just echo what I said, that I fully support it as well. So.
Thank you.
I really love the candidate or the cadet program. I think it's great. And I also love your recruiting efforts. Boy, it's very impressive that you received 300 or 703 candidates that applied. That's awesome. So
It was only through the extremely hard work of the HR and the recruitment team and Chief Freeman that happened. But we are happy that we got that kind of pool.
that's great.
Thank you.
Update from the Grand Rapids Police Department regarding partnerships and programming with the Boys and Girls Club.
Hello. Thanks for having us. And I am just going to do a brief introduction to Officer Derek Learned here, who is here to present from our department. So just since nobody knows him, in 1996, Derek Learned began his tenure with the Grand Rapids Police Department as a patrol officer. He also then worked in the detective unit subpoena service area. In 2019, Derek was transferred to the Community Engagement Unit as a GRPD officer assigned to the Boys and Girls Club, so he's been there since that time. He works through the Youth Commonwealth at the Style Club, where he has excelled at his duties and has certainly made impactful and lasting relationships with the community's youth and staff. Derek has been recognized outside of that work at the department for his exceptional work, receiving numerous awards that have included a Distinguished Service Medal, a Life-Saving Medal, 2 unit citations, and a Certificate of Recognition. Numerous letters of recognition as well, in addition to being a nominee for the 2011 Police Officer of the Year. Derek and his wife, Allie, are actively involved in the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge in Grand Rapids. He also has 2 children and 2 grandchildren. And again, I just, more or less, I guess, I would like you to get to know all the officers and all of us that are in uniform when we come before you. So he is going to give a brief update on the Drive for Success program. And regarding this, I just want to let you know that Officer Derek Learned has been recognized by the Crime Prevention Association of Michigan. This just occurred. He was awarded the Crime Prevention Practitioner of the Year award for his work on this program through the Boys and Girls Club. And he also was a finalist at the International Association of Chiefs of Police, nominated for Police Officer of the Year last year. And he was one of the runners-up on that. But it's just We're getting recognition nationwide on this program that he came up with and he's implemented within our community. And I'll go ahead and let him take off, and then I'll go up.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for having me. We can go to the next slide. So a lot of this program, some of the faces I recognize, and I'll give a little bit of background. A lot of this program came about with my interaction with one of the kids from the Boys and Girls Club at the Style Center. The young lady was a great kid. She had aged out, and she was such a good person, they hired her to work with what we call the littles in the art room, meaning she was 18 years of age. Well, she got her own place, and she was late to work one day. She was, out of breath running in the building. The buses were late, and, we were just having a conversation, and she said that, I said, well, now that you got your own place, are you going to get a car? And she said, I don't have a license. I said, oh. I said, well, I have 3 children, and I help them get their licenses, and lots of their friends get licenses with driver's tests, just being a father. And I said, I'm willing, whatever I can do to help you. And so we kind of talked about it a little bit. And the next morning, I went back to work, and I have 2 other colleagues that work in the other Boys and Girls Clubs. And I call it kicking the can while we're having coffee. And I said, guys, I got this crazy idea. I go, the Boys and Girls Club offers all these amazing programs, no driver's license. I go, what are they supposed to do when they turn 18? You can't get around. Now, Grand Rapids has a busing system, but it's not the best. I throw Amazon under the bus all the time. They got 2 big, beautiful buildings. They do 95% tuition reimbursement for college. They work 24 hours a day, so if you want to go to school at night, you can work during the day, vice versa. No buses go to either one. They pay well, and they have health insurance. But once you turn 18, you have no way to get there. So as we talked about this, I brought it to my bosses, and a lot of the city has been involved. It kind of went up and down, and we were kind of given the blessing to do the research. And believe it or not, we called every driver's ed company in the metro area, and nobody called us back. Couldn't believe it. Well, one of my neighbors happens to be a driver's ed instructor, so I went and knocked on his door. I said, hey, I got this idea. Long story short, we end up with Century Driving Group, and the regional manager, Adam Williams, and I and the other officers have a conversation. He says, I like it. So he took it to his people at his company, and the owner liked it so much he paid for the pilot program. We ran 5 kids. One being the young lady that was already 18. She did an abbreviated program. She is fully licensed now. With that, she no longer works for us because now that she has a license, she's moved on to a better job. We had 4 other kids that we were doing, and one of them dropped out just because he wasn't ready. So the other 3 completed the program. They're completing their driving hours now with segment 1, and they're getting ready to run segment 2. Just a little bit of the background. Kind of going through the slide, we want to provide access to driver's training at a reduced cost or no cost, barrier-free. I say it to the kids all the time, I'm not going to take you to the 1-yard line of the Super Bowl and then pull the rug out from underneath you. We're going all the way in. 2, improve road safety, crash avoidance skills for young drivers. We started doing some research, and we'll get into that here in a minute, and we noticed that there was a certain age group that had high accident rate, which was shocking to us when we started looking into it. Accidents and citation increase your insurance rates for individuals. The more accidents we have in the city, of course, insurance rates go up. Nobody wants to get a ticket, and that makes it a little harder to get a decent insurance rate. Increased opportunities for mentoring, building relationships with the youth. This program, to me, is amazing because I get to build a one-on-one relationship with all of these kids in this program. And it's not just one club, but it's all 3 clubs, so we're in all 3 different communities that we're serving. They get to know us, they get to trust us, and they'll ask us some of the harder questions, that they see on social media or so forth like that. And community relations, community engagement, aligning with the GRPD's strategic plan. The more kids that we can get driver's licenses, the better our young adults are in the community, the more successful that they become, which is how we came up with the name Drive for Success. Next slide, please. So when we started looking at some of the data, this is the data that we just pulled within the department. This is just the city of Grand Rapids from our data only, not the metro area. We noticed that the 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, and the 17-year-olds, they didn't have a lot of, they didn't have a lot of accidents. Probably, we assume, because the ones that did have some accidents had driver's training. What we did notice in 2017, if you look at the 18 to 20-year-olds, it jumped to 13.7%. And we thought that was pretty significant, and we wondered why. So then we looked at 18, 13.0, 19, 12.2. What was the big difference? The only thing that we could come up with is the fact that people were waiting until they turned 18. They went down to the Secretary of State. They took a simple 20, 30, 40 question test. They had no formal knowledge of how the language of the road worked. So as we started to look into this, we thought, how can we reduce the number of accidents for our young adults? You have 3 years that equate to 13% of all the accidents in the city, a 36-month age group. It's exorbitantly high. 90% of all the accidents are a result of a driver error, probably because they don't know in the wintertime to slow down. Young drivers, they haven't had that formal training. 50% of all fatal accidents are single vehicle accidents. All this information is readily available that we get to teach the kids as we're building relationships. Next slide, please. Being a part of the Boys and Girls Club, the eligibility to participate in the program is you got to be a Boys and Girls Club member. You have to be recommended by the club directors. A lot of these kids have been coming for years and years and years since they were little. I've been there since 2019. Some of the kids have come and gone, but the club directors, they really know these kids because they've worked there a long time. And it's the partnership with the Boys and Girls Club that makes this whole. The best that we can figure out is that this program probably could not have happened anywhere else other than Grand Rapids. We tried to research if there's any other Boys and Girls Club that have police officers in them, and we can't find any in the country. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, we just didn't find them. So we needed the Boys and Girls Club, we needed the Grand Rapids Police Department, and we needed a driver's ed company to actually make this come to fruition. Going down, actively participate with the BGC. Being a part of the different programs that they offer. Of course, you have to be 14 and 8 months to be a part of the program because that's a state requirement. We try to make sure that they're driver's license eligible. So no negative history. It doesn't do any good to take driver's ed if you can't get a license. So we try to address that if there's an issue, which we haven't run into. You must sign a behavioral contract. You're representing this program, you're representing the Boys and Girls Club, and you're representing yourself in the community. And we want everybody to be successful when it comes to this program. We involve the parents. We have a parent meeting where the parents come in and we do an informational meeting at each club so the parents get to meet us. The feedback from a lot of the parents is they just can't believe that there's a police department that is trying to get young adults driver's licenses and keep people out of the criminal justice system. The more people that we get licensed, the more people that may never be a part of the criminal justice system on a minor traffic violation like not having a license. I know the state of Michigan says it's a privilege to drive in the state of Michigan, but if I could snap my fingers and you didn't have a license at the end of this meeting, how would you get home? Would you know what bus route to take? How late do the buses run? Would you have to go to the transfer center? it does make it a little bit difficult. It's doable, but in modern times, it takes a license to get to a lot of places, daycares. You must have access to a vehicle. We're trying to do the best we can. We've worked with Century Driving, and they'll give us a discounted rate if we need to help kids obtain the hours for each segment. And that comes into the fundraising that we've done. The Safe Task Force gave us money to help fund and drive and pay for driving hours. I had a meeting with Craft Technologies. They gave us a nice donation to help keep funding each class. The more that people hear about the program, the more people, the businesses are on board. They're just like, we just cannot believe that a police department is doing something like this. We built a relationship with the Secretary of State. So what we do when all the kids go to get their permit, we have an inn that where they'll open up early and we can take all the kids at one time together. Because sometimes parents work nights, days, they're not able to take the kids. Again, it's another fee that we pick up to make it, barrier free when they get their permit. And that's one of the biggest things is letting them get that permit. I mean, we all have licenses and we probably all remember being a teenager, and taking off for the first time. It's a little bit not different now because there's so many different segments, but we'll get through it. Next slide, please. We like to provide supplemental classroom. Being police officers in the Boys and Girls Club, they trust us. So we talk to them about hard questions. Do I have to roll my window down? Do I have to give my name? Identify what's a civil infraction. If you don't give your name, that becomes a criminal matter. And they have different questions that they like to ask as well. Another thing we do is mock traffic stops. We kind of took that from a Pathways to Policing program that the Boys and Girls Club they do, which will run in January. But that's a really unique part of this program because no teenager wants to get pulled over by the police. Nobody wants, you're driving down the freeway, I'm driving down the freeway, and the police officer pulls off onto the on-ramp on the freeway. Everybody checks their speed. It's a natural reaction. But we want to teach them that it's not necessarily a big deal. You got a brake light out. You don't know you have a brake light out because your foot's on the brake pedal and you're in the driver's seat. You can't see it. So showing them that what they see on social media and how to interact and have proper paperwork, they really like some of that feedback. The parents like that feedback because it takes a little bit of the edge off. I've made the comment that, how nice would it be if you're an officer on patrol and, it might be in the evening and you stop a car and you ask them where they're going and the kid says, I'm a graduate of the driver's ed program from the Boys and Girls Club. We just came from the movies. I got to drop off the front seat passenger here. My 2 back seat passengers live here and I'm going right home. That is a perfect traffic stop for a police officer. Building the relationships, again, the families love it. They can't wait to come in and see what they're working on or talk to you. When we call, because we're always trying to make sure that everybody's up to date on when they got to drive. And some people, COVID has been a nightmare for adapt, improvise, and overcome. We've had to shift gears back and forward, but we always work with the parents and we made it happen. If we promote the program and seek additional sponsors, we can grow how many kids that we train. Ideally, I would love to train driver. I would love to facilitate driver's ed all year long, and that would be my only job. Next slide, please. So the instruction portion, Century Driving Group is the state-approved and licensed company that we use. The particular program that we're finishing up right now runs from 4 to 6 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and for 2 hours, and they need 24-hour classroom, the classroom time, and then 6 drives and 4 observations. they provide the state-approved curriculum and the cars. They proctor the test for us. So the police officers are not driver's ed instructors. That's not our job. Our job is to mentor, to tutor, and to be there for them. The Century Driving Group, they'll certify the participants to meet the requirements for the segment 1, and then they have to do 90 days, require some hours, do segment 2, a road test, and then they can become fully licensed after they complete all 3 steps. Next slide. Like I said earlier, funding so far, Century Driving Group funded the pilot program with $8,000. The Safe Task Force provided us an additional $10,000 for essentials that hopefully we'll be able to use in the program we're doing now. Also, with the Boys and Girls Club, they've started a fundraising campaign on their social media page. For a platinum sponsor, a company can say, I will sponsor a child for $1,000. That takes care of the admin fees, Secretary of State, segment 1, segment 2, and any incidentals. Something we didn't even consider, birth certificates. Birth certificates can be a real issue. You know, I'm always digging through the archives, and I came up with somebody that helped me figure out how to get kids' birth certificates, and we actually had to take a kid all the way down to Benton Harbor to get a birth certificate. The teenager can get his own. We just can't get it for him, but we can provide the ride. So that was a barrier we didn't anticipate. Next slide, please. So our pilot program, as I stated before, we've been working on this program for well over a year and a half. And we finally got everything together. We ran the pilot program from April to May, 6 participants, 5 completed, segment 1, 1 voluntarily withdrew. The inspiration, as I stated earlier, is a fully licensed young adult. And she actually has 2 younger sisters that are going through the second program that we're running right now. Next slide, please. So this fall session, we started October 11th and we ran through October 18th, which is this coming Thursday. We started with 17 participants, all 17 passed. What we have found out is as this program starts to make it into the communities, we've found that other organizations, faith-based, the Grand Rapids Dream Center, and other organizations, Salvation Army, they've been trying to help young adults get licenses. They haven't had any success. So they've been contacting us to say, why are you so successful? Every single person that you guys put through gets a permit or a segment 1. And I said, well, some of it is passion. And a lot of it is the interaction with the kids. One thing we found is that driver's ed is very boring. And trust me, when the pilot program went through, I read every chapter and I answered every question just like they did because it had been 30 years since I had taken it and things had changed. So watching the same videos, when we ran the pilot program, we ran into extremely low test scores, over 50% failure rates. And we were like, okay, what's going on here? Where's the disconnect? So working with my colleagues, we discovered a computer program used in schools called Kahoot. So I don't type very well, I peck and hunt. I spent an entire weekend taking all the review questions. I put them into Kahoot. All I did was take the exact same information that the driver's ed company was giving them to study on a Quizlet card, which is more designed for a college age kid. I put it into this program and I ran them through testing, and I'd run through the program once, then I'd run through it a second time. What the program does is it separates information you know and the information you don't know so that we can review what you don't know, and then when you do it a second time, had kids that went from failing to passing. With these 17 that we're running now, we had 4 kids that didn't pass. So I took those 4 kids, did the exact same tutoring, ran them through the program. I had 2 kids that missed 46 out of 80 questions. Run them through the program, they both missed 9. Now I'm curious if they missed the same 9 and they won't let me see what questions they missed. So they went from 40 some percent, 50% to a 90. The self-esteem that these kids have now is through the roof. The connection that we've made as an officer with these kids is priceless. Not only their families, but they're the voices of the future of the city of Grand Rapids. You got a cadet program that you just talked about. One of the requirements on it is a driver's license. I would have a whole pipeline of kids coming out of the Boys and Girls Club. If they didn't have licenses, they could never be a cadet with the fire department. And we want to approach it as a homegrown recruitment effort, within our city. Having a driver's license there's a lot of requirements for it today. Let's see, next slide, please. These are just different, Fox News has been great to us. They've done some highlighting segments and things like that, and that's kind of where we're generating a little bit of our buzz. What we found is that Holland the Boys and Girls Club of Holland have reached out. They want to mirror our program because they tried sending some young adults to driver's ed. And what they were doing is they were just plugging them into classes. There was no follow-up. There was no personal interaction. And when they found out, especially after I told them that all 17 kids passed, they couldn't believe it. So they want to send their people up here to figure out what we're doing and how we're doing it and how it's so successful. Next slide. Next slide.
We're going to have to stop on that one.
Okay. Any questions? Sorry.
I have, sorry,
Please,
Chair.
go ahead.
Yeah. So just a couple things. One, thank you so much for your service. What an incredible program. And not only was it a fabulous idea, but you clearly have identified any struggles and any barriers and any problems and figured out a solution. It's really, really impressive. So I just have 2 questions. Related to I'm thinking back to my years at St. John's Home and how many of my kids I wish I could have sent to you for driver's training. But I'm curious, this whole access to a vehicle and having an adult to help log the hours needed, I can imagine for some kids that's a really challenging eligibility requirement to meet. I'm curious, have you or your partners at the Boys and Girls Club thought about maybe getting a vehicle donated and identifying individuals who could ride along to meet those 30 hours to help do that?
Phenomenal question. The Grand Rapids Dream Center, as they tried, and they were struggling with their program, they bought a driver's ed car. And they looked at it and said, they had the same barrier. How do we get the kids to 30 hours? So they bought a driver's ed car, and they're helping kids get the required 30 hours. What they want to do is work together and kind of merge the programs so that we can build what's called a portal. And if you got volunteers on one side and they say, well, I can help out on Thursday from 6 to 8, then on the other side, the kid can say, I can drive on Thursday from 6 to 8. So we're meeting that barrier, and it's cost effective.
Nice.
I know that through Century Driving, we can buy the hours at $60 an hour, but that's $3,000 a kid by the time you do 50 hours. And if you times that by 100 kids a year,
Yeah.
it's not cost effective.
Yeah.
But with what they have and what we have, we can work together and build a volunteer base and meet that requirement.
That's fabulous. And then my only other follow-up question is, I really appreciate the support you've received so far, and obviously Century stepping up and the Boys and Girls Club raising funds. Have there been conversations about opportunities for the city to support the program or support it even more so through, I know we contribute to the Boys and Girls Club. Is there an opportunity to increase that to support this program?
Absolutely. I guess that's a conversation you have amongst yourselves. I'll take any support we can get. Like I said, the more classes that we can run, the more kids we can get licensed. And just the community engagement is priceless. And in the big picture, it's not that expensive overall. I try to, an example I used when I was talking to somebody, if I knew somebody that was, say, in the insurance world, let's say over the course of a 2-year period, I could train 50 or 60 kids, and I prevented one catastrophic accident where there was not necessarily, just some hospitalizations, some property damage, a car was lost or two. But let's say the total payout was $2 million. Well, if I had 50 grand to teach driver's ed and I prevented just that one insurance company would be $1.95 million to the good.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for your service and your passion and everything
Thank
that you do at Boys and Girls Club. Yeah.
Yep, Ms. Cameron?
Any other questions?
Well, I just want to congratulate you. Boy, you have a lot of passion, and this is a wonderful program. It seems to open up the kids' whole world because they can go to work. They can, they can have a social life if they have access to a car and have a driver's license. So I know the mayor touched on this. I just wondered where else you were getting money from. Now, are you going to have another session in the winter?
Yeah. At this point, we've got enough funding to run our next class.
Okay.
We're trying to, the classroom portion takes 3 weeks, but when you have to factor in 6 drives times 17 students, it draws out. That's why this Thursday will be the end of our drives and observations. And once we complete that, then we'll be able to take a breather, reevaluate the program. I keep a running list of things that worked and things that didn't work so well, or how we want to shift things to make it better. And we'll have a meeting, reevaluate how this program went, and then get the other one set up to go after the first of the year.
I'm involved in an organization called the Public Safety Alliance, and Pastor Moody's co-chair of that committee with me, and it might be a really neat, idea for us to help in any way we can with this. And certainly, do you need volunteers as well?
For the driving portion, we're in the infancy stage of putting all of that together, because they just reached out to us, primarily because they were having a hard time teaching the old school way, that with the Quizlets, as they were trying to teach young adults that were already 18, they couldn't get them to pass the test at the Secretary of State. So they reached out to me to say, what are you guys doing that's different? Well, what I did is I emailed them my computer program. They ran a beta test with one of the young adults they were working with, walked in, passed the test first time after failing it. And all I've done is changed the delivery system of the information. I didn't change the information. It's just kids learn different today than they did in 1950s.
Well, thank you. We could, I'll get with you because we could have volunteer mentors and all that, and teachers and, and tutors if you ever wanted that. So I'll get with you.
Absolutely. Take any of the help I can get.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Officer
All right.
Mert. Appreciate you.
All
Thank you,
right.
sir.
Thank you.
Yep.
If I could just add really quick, we wanted to extend an invitation to you and any of the committee members that would like to come to a graduation from this last group. It's going to be December 1st at the FOP Hall. There's going to be a short get-together at 5:30. So we just wanted to pass that along. And also in our next public safety, with the fire chief hitting on it, we are going to, Lieutenant O'Brien's going to be bringing the rest of her members of the community engagement unit, and we are going to be going over recruiting, retaining, and community engagement events and things that we're doing as well. So
Great.
thank you very much
Great.
for your time.
Thank you,
Thank
DC
you.
Rogers.
This last item is an update regarding the Safe Task Force. Mr. Kane.
Thank you, Commissioner. Officer Learn there was my first ride-along officer, and we found out we're both from Lansing, Michigan, so great ideas come out of Lansing, Michigan. I want everyone to know that. So we're having another pitch and highlight night at Ottawa Hills High School, November 17th from 6 to 8:30. I want to make sure that the Public Safety Committee and the public are aware of that. We have 18 organizations that are participating and 2 individuals. We have neighborhood associations, churches, independent workshop providers, day camp facilitators, the Boys and Girls Club, and many others. These are grassroots ideas on how to reduce violence in our community, and would love to see the public come out and others to see the great ideas that the public has to keep our community safe. So just want to extend that invitation and make sure you guys all know about that. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Kane. No other questions or comments? I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you.